What's up, everyone? Hope you're doing fantastic today. This is Raphael Garcia here for episode 153 of the MMA Ratings Podcast. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, and I hope you are doing well today. I hope you have had a good week. We did not do any shows last week simply because I needed some time away. Mental health is something that I'm trying to take a stronger stance on in 2020, whatever this year is, and I needed a break. So I took a break last week, didn't do this show, didn't do the wrestling podcast as well, and just kind of hung out and rested. So I'm back this week. Schwan is not with me today. He's probably doing super dad stuff as he usually is. So it is just me. And I have a couple of things to talk about today. We have three topics we're going to bounce around on when it comes to the combat sports world today. So before I do that, I want to always say thank you for taking the time to listen to this show. Please be sure to subscribe to our content. You can catch us on MMA Ratings Net, where you find all of the written work from myself, Schwan, Michael, and Adam. And you can check out our social media spaces over at MMA Ratings Net on Instagram and Twitter. And you can also catch us on YouTube for this podcast and our wrestling podcast at MMA Ratings on YouTube. And you can find us on various podcasting platforms such as iTunes, Anchor, and Spotify and others as well. So please be sure to like and subscribe to our content. Share it with your friends and let everyone know that you have listened to the MMA Ratings podcast because that support goes a long way for us. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into some of the content pieces for this week. We're going to start off with what was probably the biggest story in combat sports this week, and that was the boxing rematch between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, where Tyson Fury got the stoppage via technical knockout at the end of the seventh round when Fury's corner threw in the towel. So I want to start with some thoughts on the outcome of the fight, and in my opinion, the finish. Okay, so I had picked Fury to win. I thought he would win a decision because I recognized he was a better boxer of the two, and I thought he was going to do enough to negate Wilder's power and stop him from landing anything massive that would have ended the fight. I thought he would have been able to do enough of that throughout 12 rounds to get the win, but I didn't think he was going to pour it on in a way that would allow him to get the finish. And boy, was I wrong. I mean, he was hurting Wilder from the very start. You saw him drop Wilder as well. So he was laying it on. It's almost as if he went in there with the intention of proving a point. And that's almost exactly what he did. When the fight was coming to an end, you just saw him measuring Wilder in a way that I don't think any of us really expected to see. And it goes a long way in cementing him as the better boxer, as probably the greatest heavyweight in the sport right now. And it's hard to really argue any opposite to that. But the outcome overall, I'm not going to say it surprised me. Well, like I said, I picked Fury to win, but I just did not expect that finish to happen in that way. I was talking to some people who worked with me at Fight Metric about this fight a couple of hours before, and we were talking about how long it was going to go. And I was making the case that we should always pick the over. I expected the fight to go all 12 rounds. We were hanging up on whether it would go 6 or 7. I was arguing for all 12, and it looks like we were right at 7 for this finish. And I mean, there's nothing really that you can take away from this that benefits Wilder in any way, shape, or form. He was outclassed in every way from start to finish. And I think that really hurts his legacy per se. And what's interesting about this is because I have a lot of casual fight fans. I have a lot of casual friends who are, excuse me, I have a lot of friends who are casual fight fans, and many of them were watching this fight, and they all kind of had the same response as if like we thought we would see more from Deontay Wilder, and that's especially important among the African American community where there has been a kind of a falling off of interest in boxing and MMA as a whole. Well, there never really was that much of a following within MMA, but that's another story for another day. But from a boxing standpoint, I think that the support has slowly waned, and because there hasn't been a marquee name that has garnered the attention of a Tyson or a Mayweather. Wilder was probably the closest one coming around to this point, especially with people like B Hop out of the sport. Shane Mosley and Roy Jones Jr. You know, all those names are out of the sport, so there hasn't been a name that has garnered the same amount of attention. Andre Ward wasn't that guy. Gervonta Davis isn't that guy, especially with his issues coming around now. So there really hasn't been a name that has been able to keep that interest there in the years since. Since Tyson, since Mayweather, since B Hop, since Shane Mosley, et cetera, et cetera. There hasn't been a name there. A lot of people thought that Wilder would be that name. And I mean, maybe he still will be at some point in time. He is, heavyweights do fight longer. They do fight further into their advanced ages. But this is a fight that will, I'm not gonna say hamper him, but it will hurt his cachet. I mean, Fury just may be that guy he can't beat. Everyone has that individual. It's kind of like if you look back to trying to think of a MMA comparison where Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman. Anderson Silva beat a whole lot of people, but he just couldn't do anything with Chris Weidman. You look at who's another guy that had multiple rematches. I can't really think of any off the top of my head right now, but there's always going to be that person that you just can't overcome. And for Deontay Wilder, it looks like Tyson Fury may be that individual. So I want to talk a little bit about how this probably will impact Fury, because like I said, he probably has the most to gain from this outcome. And you already see a lot of other outlets supporting and kind of speaking praises of him. What caught my attention was this past Monday on WWE Monday Night Raw. They were shouting him out heavily during that broadcast. And in the months leading to this event, he was featured on various shows for WWE, and there was also a rumor that he was going to be in the Royal Rumble, which was back in January. That did not occur, thankfully, but he has that appeal. It's clear that they want to work with him. I would not be surprised if he has some type of involvement at WrestleMania this year, some type of segment or something like that. Would not be surprised at all. You see that they've already had him in the ring for multiple segments in a match with Braun Strowman in the past. So if they found a way to get him involved again, that would not surprise me one bit. So like that really shows that he has the ability to be a bigger star than he currently already is, but I'm not sure if that star will be a transitional or will it translate across multiple demographics. I don't think that that's quite the space. 'Cause combat sports is a bit different than say basketball or soccer or football or something like that, where athletes attract fans of various demographics. Combat sports is a little different, and I don't think that Fury will be that individual. I'm not saying Wilder was either, but yeah, I just don't see either one of these guys drawing a lot of attention from other people outside of their own demographic. There's a bigger story going on from this fight about whether or not the towel should have been thrown in as like that. Clearly that's how the fight ended, but the response to that afterwards has been very interesting to follow. Because of course there's that contingent talking about the towel should not have been thrown, that they should have let Deontay Wilder go out on his shield. But in the grand scheme of things, look at what has happened across boxing in the last 3 years or so. How many people have died from injuries from taking prolonged and extended beatings? I mean, I think up to like four in the last 3 years or so, like that, 4 or 5. That is 4 or 5 too many, not necessarily even counting all the others that have sustained long term, not even career altering, I'm talking life altering injuries just from taking prolonged beatings from fights that could have been stopped. This could have been one of those situations. I mean, at the end of the seventh round, Tyson Fury was teeing off on Deontay Wilder, like measuring him in a way that you see on World Star videos, or measuring him in a way that you see on Instagram where people are getting knocked out left and right. That's how he was measuring Deontay Wilder. So you have a trained combat athlete measuring on another man like that, and it doesn't who couldn't defend himself. He had his hands up, but he was basically a punching bag at that point in time. And there's people saying that he should have been allowed to take more damage to go out on his shield. And even think about that. That phrase, go out on your shield, is emblematic of death. I think it was the Spartans, I believe, who would carry their dead on their shield after a war would be waged. So that right there in and of itself is saying that you're okay with someone taking enough damage within the ring that they can be seriously injured. Like that is the level of ignorance within that simple comment that is troubling about this whole situation here. I think Luke Thomas is attempting to have the trainer who threw the towel. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's Mark Berryman, who threw the towel on his show, and I hope he gets that interview because that's a conversation I want to hear, because I think that that's something that's missing in combat sports. It's definitely missing in mixed martial arts. You probably see it more in boxing, and there's probably a myriad of reasons around that. Boxers get paid more, so they are already, they're guaranteed their money. They're not doing the whole split purse show and win money deal, because that's probably a big part of it too. Like, there's so many different ramifications as to why this is not occurring more than you would see in combat sports. But even this past weekend at UFC Norfolk, hours before Fury and Wilder fought, there was probably two examples, at least, of fights that could have been stopped by their corners throwing in the towel. One being Carolina Kowalkiewicz, who was taking a beating from can't think of the young Chinese lady that was beating on her, but she was getting thumped. She couldn't see out of one eye for almost 15 minutes, and she's getting pummeled in a way. And she's 2-6. She's fighting for her UFC roster spot, and I'm sure she lost that fight, and I'm sure she's going to get cut from the UFC. But look at all the damage she's taken over the last few years, from her fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, where she took 25 minutes worth of damage there, to getting absolutely lambasted by Jessica Andrade, getting knocked out there, to I think she had a close fight with Michelle Waterson, where she took I think Michelle may have submitted her, but still, extra levels of damage that you did not have to take across your career is continuing to happen, and we saw that in that fight on Saturday. The main event between Dan Hooker and Paul Felder, we're going to talk about that later, but those two guys took miles and miles of damage as well. Now that fight was a little different because it was closer, and it was two guys exchanging a lot of shots and trading damage. So it wasn't to a point where it was so one sided you could have stopped it. But man, those two guys may never be the same. Dan Hooker didn't throw in the towel when he was fighting against Edson Barbosa, and this is the second fight now where he's taken a lot of damage. Who knows what that is going to have on not only the quality of his fighting in the future, but his quality of life. So I always err on the side of the towel being thrown. I do not have any issue with that, because in my opinion, it is the corner taking a stand for their fighters' health and their fighters' safety. And I agree with that. I am not one to ever say that towel should not be thrown in. If I was ever cornering someone, I would throw in the towel. I told a guy who I was helping get ready for a fight, if you are in danger, I'm going to throw in the towel. They can be mad at me later, but I'd rather them be safer and in a better health situation than taking extensive amount of damage where they're not responding, and they're not in position to defend themselves. So what's next for Wilder and Fury? I think that, well, Wilder has already called for the rematch, the trilogy fight. I am not a fan of that. While it's a 30-day kind of, I guess, clause that he has to call for that fight in order for it to get booked and made, I am not a fan of that immediate rematch, because you often see that when the turnaround for fights are faster, that the situation is usually the outcome is usually the same, and it's more decisive more often than not. One example of the opposite that stands out to me, that kind of pops out to mind immediately, was a fight between Frankie Edgar and Benson Henderson when that fight was much where a lot of time had passed and or not excuse me a lot of time did not pass between the two and the fight was different. A lot of people think that Edgar won the second and lost the first fight, but outside of that, oftentimes the fights tend to look the same and you tend to get the same type of outcome. So when it comes to Fury and Wilder, I would like to see Tyson Fury fight Anthony Joshua. I think that that situation needs to get rectified. We need to get the Anthony Joshua conversation out of the way. I mean, his loss to Anthony Ruiz really did hurt his stock, even though he got that win back. He didn't look like the world beater that he was claiming himself to be. So his stock dropped after that moment. He's still relatively young. He's 30 years old. Well, I mean, that's not even relatively young. I will call that young. He's 30 years old, and I think, how old is Tyson Fury? Let me see. Let me pop that open real quick. I think Tyson Fury is 36, but let me see. Tyson Fury is 31, excuse me, so he's relatively young as well too. So I think that that's the fight that should be made first. Now Deontay Wilder doesn't have as much time. He is an older individual who I would see him wanting to get that fight back sooner rather than later. Deontay Wilder is 34. So I mean, again, these guys still have time. They still have an opportunity to build to something interesting between the three of them. I think that that's something that people will want to see. We do want to see all three individuals fight each other. I think so. I believe Joshua should be put into this conversation at some point in time. I know that clearly um, there's clearly contract and different promotional conversations that need to be had around that, which is always going to muddy things up and murk, muddle things up and just make it not as interesting as some may say. But this is still an opportunity. I think that those fights need to be made and they need to be explored more so than anything else. But outside of them, I'm not too sure. I'm not. This is why I hope Schwan or wish Schwan would be on the show because I'm not too familiar with the heavyweight division beyond those three. But again, I think that there is some value that could be made about finding a way to put those two men in fights together. Maybe do Wilder and Joshua to see which one of them will fight Fury in the future. Do Fury and Joshua to see who gets the me fix this to see how Wilder fits in on the back end. There's options there, but at the end of the day, it's a difficult conversation to be held in any way, shape, or form. So I wanted to move on to topic number two, which was looking at UFC Norfolk, which is scheduled for this weekend. And this is an interesting card to me, not because it has a bunch of valuable fights, a bunch of big names on the card, but for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, you can look at the main event and you can see why this is important because the UFC flyweight title is back up for grabs between Joseph Benavidez and Davison, I think that's how you say that, Figueiredo. And this is the belt that was originally held by Demetrius Johnson. Henry Cejudo won the title from him and then vacated it because he was refusing to defend it. So that belt is up for grabs, and you have to immediately wonder, like, is the UFC going to make a point to keep this division around? I don't even know. Do they have rankings for this division? Because I remember they started to release guys that were ranked at 125. Yes, they do have a divisional ranking set up for that, but they started to cut guys that were listed in this group. It's interesting because on their website, Cejudo is still listed as champion, but this fight isn't for an interim belt; it's for the actual title. I mean, that's my understanding. Let me pop that open real quick. Let me see, because I don't think that I think this is for the actual title. Yeah, this is for the vacant belt. So they still have Henry Cejudo listed as the champion. Hopefully they change that post haste on Saturday. But looking at this division, I mean, it's pretty much it's I don't know if you use the term barren, but they have to figure out what to do with this group, especially after losing a couple of guys that they decided to let go. At UFC Auckland, Kaya Kara France, he actually looked really good in his fight against Tyson Nam. So maybe he's someone that they're looking at building up. But across the board, I think that I'm always a fan of the 125-pound division. I was a big Demetrius Johnson fan. He was my favorite fighter for an extended period of time. I still think he's one of the top 3 fighters in the world today, top 3 to 5. So there's definitely that's my bias. I don't think that the UFC should do away with this division at all. I'm happy to see them putting this title up for grabs, giving fighters another opportunity. Because when one thing we saw with a lot of these double champs and these champs coming around is that opportunities were going away. Now you don't see. We're gonna talk about Megan Anderson in a second, but she's demanding that Amanda Nunes give up the featherweight title. She doesn't plan on defending that. We know Henry Cejudo wasn't planning on defending the flyweight title, so that's why he was forced to give up that. Um, Daniel Cormier was forced to give up the light heavyweight title. Conor McGregor was forced to give up the featherweight title when he had both. So like there's multiple examples of where these double champ situations don't create opportunities for the rest of the roster across 2 divisions. So hopefully we see that slowly go away in a sense, but we're looking at one of the first steps this weekend with this flyweight title being up for grabs. I think that Benavidez is going to come out the victor here. He's been I guess the bridesmaid is I don't know if that's a PC word to use anymore, but he's been the bridesmaid so many different times that at some point in time he has to be um, able to win a title. He's fought for 3 different titles already. He's fought for the flyweight title twice. The first time against Demetrius Johnson, losing a split decision, then getting knocked out in the rematch. He also fought Dominic Cruz back in WEC days for the bantamweight title and was unable to get it done there as well. So maybe this is the opportunity where we see Benavidez get a victory and finally get a belt put around his waist. I think that would be a good moment. I think that would be a good moment for the sport that is often marred by too many bad and cringeworthy moments. So I think that alone is something worth watching as well. So I'm looking forward to that main event. I wanted to talk about Megan Anderson as well. She is on the main card as well as Felicia Spencer, who beat her in her last fight out. But I wonder, this is an opportunity for Anderson to get some type of shine back. When she came into the UFC, she was expected to be the woman who would give what was her name, Chris Cyborg, a run for her money. Now that did not occur. Instead, she's gone 2-2 since that time, where she's won. She lost to Holly Holm and then lost to Felicia Spencer, and then she won 2 fights as well. And this is an opportunity for her to put together back-to-back wins for the first time since joining the UFC, and it is a good opportunity for her. She's fighting a woman who is 5'7", okay, 5'7", and at a massive disadvantage when it comes to size, when it comes to position, when it comes to everything else. So we know that this is the type of fight that Megan Anderson should style on. I think she's nearly 6 feet tall. Let me see how tall Megan Anderson. I feel like she's 6 feet tall. She'll have the range advantage. Um, it's funny. I go to Wikipedia, I type in Megan, and I get all types of responses first. So yeah, she's 6 feet tall, fighting at 145 pounds. Oh, let me see what the reach is in this fight here. Let's see something. See if they have that. So I'm hopping over to Fight Metric, and the reach is, man. So Norma, her opponent is 5'7" with a 67-inch reach. Megan Anderson's 6 feet tall with a 72-inch reach. So okay. So Norma is normally a 135 pounder, so she's fighting up to get into the UFC. Now that makes a little bit more sense here. But clearly she's at a major disadvantage in this bout here, and I expect that Anderson will figure out a way to style on her. And she's only 4-0, so she has every advantage that you could want coming into this fight. I just hope that Anderson finds a way to translate that and get a big win at a time where she needs it if she's going to keep pace with Spencer fighting for a title shot. Because right now they don't have women's featherweight rankings, but Felicia Spencer is. Let me see how she's. I know she's at least 1-0 in the UFC. So she lost to Chris Cyborg. I remember that fight, but she's already fought for the title. So here it is now. Anderson wins. Maybe she could be the next person in line to fight Amanda Nunes. Now I don't think she wins that fight, but we'll see how that goes in the near future. So another thing I wanted to talk about from this card as well was the amount of young talent that they have across UFC Norfolk. I was writing a piece about this for Fansided, and there's 24 fighters on this card. Let me double check because it may have just changed. Yeah, there's 24 fighters on this card. Of the 24 that are here, 18 of them are 29 years old or less. And those individuals have come into, majority of them, I think only maybe one or two have come into the UFC by just fighting on regional organizations. All the others have come up through either the Ultimate Fighter, like Luis Pena, or the Dana White Contender Series, or some way, shape, or form. They've taken other fights in the UFC. And I was looking at a couple of these guys, and there's names I didn't recognize who are 26, 25, 27 years old, and they already have 3 fights within the UFC, multiple wins. And I'm like, who are these individuals? That shows you just how big the promotion has gotten and just how active everyone is across the board. But that really stood out to me because I laughed with the NFL Combine coming up in a couple of weeks in April. I know at least my friends who we worked at ESPN together, we still talk sports all the time together. We often look at the birthdays of the newer draft picks as they come up, and we cringe at individuals who are born in the 90s, born like so many, like not even years ago. We're getting to the point now where some of these athletes were born in the 2000s. Think about that. Some of these athletes soon will be born in the 2000s fighting in the octagon. We already see that in the NFL. We already see that in the NBA. See that in baseball. See that in soccer as well. We're getting there. We're getting to that point within the mixed martial arts community as well. And I always think that it's exciting to watch new prospects compete at a high level because it's such a hard conversation to have when trying to decide who is a breakthrough talent and who is not. It's a crapshoot. You can make the argument and say, oh, this person right here will be challenging for a belt at some point in time in the future. This person right here has all the tools to be great, and then they totally disappear. You have someone like a Matt Riddle who was on like almost like a 4 or 5 fight win streak when he was cut from the UFC at a relatively young age. Now he's still doing fantastic work over in the WWE today, but he was young when his fight career came to an end. Or you can have someone like a Jordan Mean who was young, fighting for an extended period of time at a young age, but doing so much damage to himself that now he's not the fighter that a lot of people expected him to be. Same thing with a Rory McDonald. He never reached UFC championship levels, but he's a former Bellator champion, heading over to the PFL, but he's still relatively, I think he's only 31 or 32, and we recognize the amount of damage he's taken over his career. Like, let's look real quick. So, let's see. Rory McDonald is 30 years old. He'll be turning 31 this year. And people will argue that his best days are behind him. He's 31 and he has, Let's see how many professional fights he has on his career. 28. He's 21 and 6, man. I didn't even realize. Yeah, because he's 21 and 6. He's 30. Then we have Jordan Mean, who will be turning 31 this year as well. He has 43 professional fights on his record, almost twice as many, and he's gotten back into the UFC. I think he has. Actually, I take that back. He was just recently signed by Bellator, riding a two-fight win streak. So you have to wonder what these guys are really looking like. I remember when he lost 3 fights in a row. He lost to Thiago Alves, Emil Meek, excuse me, and Bilal Muhammad from 2015 to 2016, where he only fought one time each year. But people were pretty much considering him washed, especially after that Matt Brown drumming that he took back in 2013. But still, the conversation is still the same here. Like when you see young fighters come into mixed martial arts, you not be able to tell what they're going to be long term. But it's always enjoyable, for lack of a better term, to watch them rise up through the rankings. And this Saturday's UFC Norfolk card has a lot of those individuals that we should pay attention to and see what they play out to be over the long term. So I also wanted to talk about some fight announcements that were booked for that were announced this week. So first we have Henry Cejudo versus Jose Aldo for the Bantamweight Championship at UFC 250. And yeah, everybody that's involved with this should be ashamed of themselves. Aldo's coming off of a loss. Yes, he made weight fighting against Marlon Moraes, and Cejudo has a recent victory over Marlon, but it's not as if Cejudo doesn't have contenders. Peter Yan is there for him to fight. He has Aljamain Sterling, two guys that have been calling him out, that he shows no interest in fighting. And that's pretty embarrassing when you look at you're supposed to be a champion. You're supposed to be defending the belt. But you want to defend it against a guy, Aldo, who lost the featherweight championship. Let me see, what is Aldo's current win-loss record? Like, where is he sitting? Let's see something real quick. So Jose Aldo is right. He's lost 5 of his last 8. 5 of his last 8. He lost to Alexander Volkanovski, who's a current featherweight champion. Lost to Marlon Moraes via split decision. Whatever you think about that fight, it was still a split decision. He lost to Max Holloway twice, and he lost to Conor McGregor. We all know about that fight back in 2015. What else is there to really say about that? But yet he's the guy that's fighting for the title just because Henry Cejudo made enough noise to get this fight booked. It completely throws out everything about these rankings. I mean, somehow Aldo is sitting at number 6 in the division when he doesn't have a win. How does that make? He's sitting at 6 in bantamweight and 11 at featherweight. How does that even make sense? You have Marlon Moraes, Aljamain Sterling, Peter Yan, Corey Sandhagen, and Raphael Sunsao sitting ahead of him. All of those guys should be getting title shots before Jose Aldo. But this is the age that we live in now, where guys like Cejudo can win belts, not want to defend them against viable contenders, and chase after money. Now I'm not mad at him for that part. You are a prize fighter. His job is to go out there and win the biggest prizes that he possibly can for as long as he possibly can, because his career is going to be short. I totally understand that. I get that. But there's got to be some type of system in place to make sure that people are getting opportunities, and this isn't it. And the other fight that was announced is the exact opposite, where you have Valentina Shevchenko fighting Joanne Calderwood at UFC 251. And if you look at what Shevchenko is doing, she's fighting every contender that's put in front of her. She beat Jessica Eye, knocked her out, stopped Caitlin Chukagian via strikes. That's the number 1 and the number 2 contender. She's fighting Joanne Calderwood next at number 3. She beats her. She may be going after Jennifer Maia and Roxanne Modafferi as well. I mean, she's going. It's almost as if she has like a list of names and she's checking them off one by one. one by one, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be done. I mean, Amanda Nunes was doing the same thing in her division. Jermaine Durandamy beat her. Holly Holm beat her. I mean, she beat so many people on that list already that it's like, what else are we supposed to do with her? You see that happening with the women, but the men are doing this jump around bullshit that is just out of control. Especially Henry Cejudo, and it's almost it's embarrassing to watch. It's ridiculous in my opinion. It's totally ridiculous, and I think that this fight is a prime example of that. A, UFC rankings don't mean shit, and B, like this divisional stuff is just this champ stuff is just killing, not killing the sport, but it's limiting the opportunities for men and women to be able to do the best that they possibly can for themselves. Because Aldo's not deserving of a title shot. The way, and it's almost sickening to watch Dana White try to sell this to people as if he like just tell the truth. Just say, hey, we're making this fight because looking at the divisions, this is probably the biggest name that we can put in this position that will make the most money. Just say that. People would be okay with you just saying that instead of serving us up some ridiculous story that he does each time a camera gets in front of his face. And the cringe shit that Henry Cejudo's doing, I'm not a fan of it. I don't know a lot of people that are, but clearly it's helping him get his way in some way, shape, or form. So that fight was also announced. Joanne Calderwood challenging Valentina Shevchenko for her flyweight title. Okay, that's going to be another body that Shevchenko catches because I don't think Calderwood has anything for her. I don't know too much about Calderwood. I know I've seen her fight, but I just can't think of seeing too much of her. So let me pop open her drink real quick. So I mean, she has a strong kickboxing record too, where she's what 19-2 across her kickboxing career, but that pales in comparison to Valentina Shevchenko. She's 14-4 in MMA. She recently lost to Caitlin Chukagian via unanimous decision. She's lost to Cynthia Calvillo, Jessica Andrade, and Marina Moroz, excuse me, all within the UFC since 2015. So it's like okay, well, this is another body, but Shevchenko is doing what she needs to do in beating everybody that the UFC puts in front of her. As I've always said on the show in conversations, I'm not the biggest Shevchenko fan because I don't like the way they push her so much. But she keeps getting the job done. There's no arguing what she's been able to do as champion, and she's doing what the champion should do, and just checking names off, fighting them one after another, fighting them in relatively short order as well too, and looking good, looking better every time she does so. So the last thing I wanted to touch upon, and I just wanted to hit on this really quickly, was the main event at UFC Auckland where we had Paul Felder and Dan Hooker fighting to a split decision, with Hooker getting the win there. And I haven't watched this fight again. I may do so, but off of what I remember and talking to my colleagues at the time, I think I gave Hooker around 1-3-5. 2-4 to Felder, and Felder was doing a good job of winning 4 or 5 until he got taken down. I definitely think he was landing the harder shots. He was doing the damage. There's a point there where he looked like he had Hooker about to go out, and he was going to get a stoppage finish there, but Hooker was able to hang on and get the takedown. I think he almost got to his back in some way, shape, or form, and was able to get the points there to get the win and take the round. But this was an excellent, excellent fight. This is one of those fights where you got to go back and just sit back and watch it. Don't tweet while you're watching it. Don't take any notes. Just enjoy the violence. These two guys were beating the shit out of each other, and they were doing it in a tactical, technical way that was just violent. I mean, there's a picture that was going around of both men strapped to gurneys afterwards being sent to the hospital, or I don't know if they were sent to the hospital. That was when they were already in the hospital. But it's those type of fights that is just like, man, these are the fights that make fans of these fighters, but they're also the fights that shave years off of people's careers, on years, probably years off of their life as well too. It was violent. It was a violent back and forth battle, and you have to be thankful for fighters that can give us that type of that type of fight for our enjoyment. That's why we watch the sport. Paul Felder, he announced that he's stepping away. That hasn't been 110% confirmed that he may be retiring, but either or, Felder is that guy that he was never he never got to the title shot place. He never became a champion. He always got close. He always got close to get there. And every sport needs those guys. They're the guys you root for. You want to see them get the opportunity. You want to see them break through to the top, but they just don't get there. And if that was his last time fighting, then okay, I understand that. But I'm a Paul Felder fan. He is a tough out for anyone. I wish he didn't take that fight at welterweight when he did, but I understand why he did. But he's a tough out for anyone, and that man deserves some respect. I love seeing him on the booth when he's in the booth. I wonder if he's going to go back to acting a little bit too as well. You never know. He was a thespian with time on the stage before he started fighting, but either way, shape, or form, I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you to Paul Felder. And if you have an opportunity, guys, go back and watch that fight with Dan Hooker. It was fucking amazing from start to finish. So, what am I working on? As usual, covering MMA, covering professional wrestling. You can find my work here on MMA Ratings. You can find my work over on Fansided and Daily DDT as well. Please be sure to go to MMARatingsNet.net to rate the fights. Let us know how excited you are for upcoming contests and how you rated the fights that have recently gone by. Be sure to do that. And again, you can always find us at MMARatingsNet for all of our written content. You can check us out on all the podcast platforms. YouTube is our main outlet. We're at MMA Ratings. That's our channel there. Spotify, Anchor, all of those outlets, iTunes. Check us out there. MMA Ratings Net on Instagram and Twitter. We're constantly working on our social media strategies, constantly working on our strategies there to draw in more viewers. So be sure to check out all of our content. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share everything you find as well too. Again, my name is Raphael Garcia. You can catch me at rgarcia_sports across social media. Thank you for listening to this show today. And please be sure to send any questions to me on Twitter as well. I'll do the best I can to get to those. And thank you again, everyone, and have a great night.